All right, guys, come on back. Come on back. Please, has anyone submitted a question? We're going to answer them after this talk during lunch. Please submit one. It's always fun to engage with what you all are engaging with and make it practical. So, we talked about this idea of our stories matter, how we came together as a couple, and then the barriers that exist. And so we're actually going to talk a little bit around this idea of conflict and stress in our bodies. And we're going to try to do it in maybe, hopefully, kind of a unique, different way than what you're used to. So I want to start off, and I got permission from this couple because they recently came in, and they've been doing marriage counseling with me for about 6 months, and they're just in a really bad place when they came to see me, and there's just a lot to untangle with this couple. But they just came recently, and they had just gone, just the two of them, to Costa Rica for a vacation. So they left their kids back here, and they went to Costa Rica, and they just reported, like, it was an amazing time. Like, it was so good for them. They were able to connect. They didn't have many fights. Now, granted, as I kind of was curious and wanted to celebrate with them, it was an all-inclusive resort. It was one of those kind of places where, like, everything was taken care of for them.
Take me now.
Yes. I don't know if you guys have ever had that experience, right? When, like, you get to go away and, like, things are just, like, really good. And we're like, how can we bottle this up, right? And bring it in. The problem is, what's the problem with that? What's the problem with going to Costa Rica on an all-inclusive resort? Yeah, not realistic, I heard someone say. Yeah, no, they weren't cleaning. They didn't have, like, dishes to do. They didn't have laundry to do. They didn't have to cook. Like, they didn't have, kids. They didn't have work, long hours, stressful deadlines at work. So the reality is like, life was pretty good, but then you come back to Orlando, and there's stress, right? Like, what are some stressors in life back in Winter Springs, Florida for kids? What else? Schedules, kids, laundry. What else? Life. Yes. What did you say?
Unexpected costs.
Unexpected costs, like financial
stress.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so there's these stressors that just are life, right? Like, it's not like we're going to get rid of these. We can't live in Costa Rica on an all-inclusive resort for the rest of our life. And they're stressors. And so we're going to actually talk first about what happens to our bodies when we're under stress. Because stress is connected to conflict.
Yes, and we have found that emotional regulation is a big part of really, like, healthy marriages, is understanding individually how to regulate your emotions. So I'm going to talk about your dashboard for a moment. And what do you do with your dashboard when lights come on? Some of you may stop at the gas station. Some of you are like me, and you don't go to the gas station until you're empty. But then, can I go 15 miles? Can I go 20 miles past the empty? So we're going to talk about trying to consider what's happening in your body before you are 20 miles below empty. First thing on the dashboard, I want you to think about in terms of your own stress levels, even right now, is kind of in the realm, on your dashboard, is in the realm of the cognitive state. So in the realm of our minds. One indication that you might be under stress is black and white thinking. So you begin to feel very polarized, maybe very quick to make an opinion. Maybe you start to feel judgmental. This is a big indicator for me if there's a problem and I'm trying to find somebody to blame. I feel out of control, that my daughter has a learning issue, and so all of a sudden I am suddenly blaming this part of their teacher or this part of the school system. Then there's dissociation. Do you feel disconnected from your body? Do you feel like you're not fully in the room? Like you're here this morning, but at some level you don't feel like you're in the room. You're somewhere else. Forgetfulness. This is a big thing for me when I'm under stress. I remember one time at RTS, I lived near the seminary, and I think it was during exams when I was in seminary, and I left RTS to drive home to get a textbook. We still used textbooks. We didn't have ebooks or anything then. And I got to my house, and I couldn't remember what I had come home for, so I drove back to RTS. And then when I got back to RTS, I remembered that it was the book, so I drove home, and I got back to my house, and then I couldn't remember what I had come back for, so I drove back to RTS. And I will just quickly notice a sense of forgetfulness when I'm under stress. So these are kind of dashboard, kind of check engine lights for you. The next would be in your emotional state. Are you feeling like a sense of shame? And shame is a feeling that you maybe are not enough or you're not good enough. It's this deep sense that maybe you're unworthy. Have you felt a lot of feelings of sadness or tearfulness, that maybe there's some grief that's kind of emerging that you haven't gotten a chance to tend to? Have you felt any feelings of rage? And again, anger is like a normal emotion, but sometimes we all of a sudden just feel this very, very intense feeling of rage that kind of takes over our body, where you feel like your heart's pumping and you're like, I don't know where that's come from. That might be a good indicator that you're under a sense of stress, that there's something going on. Or maybe there's a sense of depression or apathy, like things that used to be important to you are no longer important to you. So you used to love hanging out with friends or maybe going running, and suddenly you're like, I don't even feel like doing anything. That could be a sense that's part of your emotional state. And this is really, really important here, and something we often don't talk about or miss is somatic issues. These are issues within the body. So maybe you've been noticing that you're having a lot of gut issues or a lot of upset stomach. This sometimes can be the first thing that we might notice, is our body saying hey, there's something going on here. There's something that needs tended to. Maybe you're having a lot of neck and back pain, headaches and teeth grinding. That has been that was one of the first indicators. When I graduated, I went right into private practice counseling, and I had never really taken any kind of sabbatical or break from counseling. And I was starting to get the worst migraine headaches, and I found out that I was clenching my teeth so bad that I had horrible wear on a lot of my teeth, and had to start wearing a mouth guard at night, and actually had to get one of my teeth removed. And part of that was just this underlying stress that was just coming out at night. And so I had to take my first, and it was wonderful, I took my first time where I was I'm taking time off of this. I need to tend to some issues in my body, and they were exposing some stressors in my life. And then finally, behavioral issues. So you may notice that you're overeating, or that you're undereating, or that you're overworking, that you're maybe constantly there's this constant proclivity to try to get things accomplished. Maybe you're feeling a little bit of increased sarcasm, or you're just kind of feeling jaded, or maybe increased scrolling on your phone or social media, or that you just are more isolated than normal. Or you may have some sexual acting out behaviors. So just these are just some indicators kind of on your dashboard that there may be some stress, there may be some underlying issues that are going on that need tended to.
And so what we want to do for the next few minutes is give you kind of a category of how to tend to, or even check in to what your body is holding. And these are our bodies, like these are the temple that God has given us. And often we can ignore, push away, push through what's happening in our bodies. And when we do that and try to do that in relationship, it can create sparks. It can create conflict. And so there's the term here, affect regulation. And it's really simple. It's basically our ability to manage and appropriately respond to our experience of emotions. And so it's knowing kind of what your internal state is. Your affect, your cognitions, even being curious about your behaviors, as Rachel mentioned. It's knowing what's happening in you physiologically and emotionally. And we just don't do a good job of this, in the church. I don't feel like, we just don't do a good job of connecting all the good and rich theology that we know, and getting it to integrate into our emotional, somatic experience.
And I would even say that God gives us the gifts of these particular check engine lights popping up saying, hey, this is something that you need to tend to. And do we tend to put duct tape over our dashboard to kind of cover up? Or do we start to see that as an invitation and an indicator that we need to do some deeper exploration?
Mm-hmm. So I just want to take a minute for you. You can keep your eyes open if you're more comfortable, or just to close your eyes if you're open to doing that. And I just want you to check in to your breath and then to your body. What are you holding in your body right now? I spoke to someone at the break whose daughter is going out with friends today and just feeling anxious about that. Or maybe even just being here, when can this be done? I just want to go and watch some TV on Saturday, feeling maybe irritable or impatient. Well, just what are you feeling? I know for me, when I got here, I was feeling anxious about the videos, the 3 videos we showed, just the internet connection and getting them set up. So I just noticed that I was feeling, my body was just feeling anxious about that. And then just the normal sense of nervous excitement about speaking to you guys, wanting to do a good job, wanting it to be helpful, that's there in my body right now. But just want you guys to notice that. And then there's this great tool that Dan Siegel came up with, and it's called the window of tolerance. And this is hopefully going to be a good guide for you all. And you can Google window of tolerance and print this out and take it home. Has anyone heard of this? The window of tolerance? I got one. Oh yeah, that's right. Yes, you guys have heard. Yes. Gay, I don't think you've heard of this one, so I'll teach you. So make sure you're taking some good notes here. But Dan Siegel, he's a professor. He was a professor at UCLA in psychiatry, and he came up with this great visual around our affect in the body, and so we want to go over this and then begin to okay, what does this matter, right, when it comes to marriage, our emotional state. And so the window of tolerance is just a term used to describe the zone of arousal in which a person is able to function more effectively. So if you think of the bottom as a 1 and the very top as a 10 on a scale from 1 to 10. The window of tolerance is that middle range, like a 4 to a 7. It's not like a Zen state where you're just like nothing affects you. This is not what the window of tolerance is. But it's that state where you're able to function most effectively. The brain is functioning well. You can process stimuli. You're able to reflect on I'm feeling excited, or I'm feeling lonely, or you're able to think rationally. So you're not as Rachel had mentioned with black and white thinking, you're not in this black or white thinking of it has to be this way. You're able to have some psychological flexibility in this window of tolerance. And you're able to make decisions calmly without feeling overwhelmed or withdrawn. You're able to kind of engage calmly. So it's in this comfort zone where we feel emotionally regulated. And it's here that we have the best relational interactions with our spouses, with our kids, with our coworkers, that we're just going to be set up, if you're in this window of tolerance, to have better relational connection. In this space, you're able to self-soothe and regulate your emotional space, and your nervous system is calm. It's not tight, it's not tense. So if we use the dashboard analogy, it'd be your tank is halfway full or full, and the oil's just gotten changed, and things are just kind of running smoothly, in the car. And the bodily response, the somatic responses to this window of tolerance is you have better immune response. So there's physiological aspects to this. You have increased sense of oxytocin, which Rachel mentioned earlier, which is the bonding hormone. Blood is getting circulated to non-vital organs, like your skin, and your breathing is more regulated. So it's not quick breathing or delayed breathing. It's just a good rhythm of breathing. So an example of this, and I always like to preface it because hasn't always been the case for me, of being in my window of tolerance. And this actually happened at the start of the school year, which is, if any of you all are parents, know that it can just be a lot of excitement, and then you're getting used to the new routine, and trying to get lunches and all kinds of crazy. And so Rachel and I were ships passing in the night and that week. And then on Friday I was we haven't really connected. Maybe I could, ask her if she would want to be sexually intimate tonight. And so I go into our bedroom, and she's laying in bed, and I'm hey babe, would you want to be together tonight? To which she said,
no, I don't feel close to you.
Yes, she did not feel super close to me. But it's funny because in that moment, I actually was yeah, you're right. I was able to I wasn't in this black or white thinking of oh man, we haven't connected at all, or I feel I'm always pursuing and you say no. It almost is there was a sense of oh yeah, you're right. I was able to understand where she was coming from. Now, that hasn't always happened, right? It hasn't always been the case for us. But in that moment, I was able to take a deep breath and kind of understand kind of where she was coming from. And so then we were able to just connect where she was able to connect, which is just kind of processing the week, and that in itself was connection. And so that's an example of being able to kind of respond well when you're regulated. And if you're not, if it's been a week where you have particularly felt disconnected from yourself, or particular sense of agitation, then that's probably not gonna happen in an interaction like that.
So I'm going to talk some about hyperarousal, and we call this the red zone. And I want to point out that this is actually something that we need for survival. So when my child walks into the drive-through lane at Jeremiah's Italian Ice and I see the car coming up, Hyperarousal is a good thing in that moment. All of a sudden my heart's beating. I can go super fast in human strength to come up and say, get out of the lane or grab them, because I see the car coming. But the problem is when we perpetually live in a state of hyperarousal. So when we talk about the red zone, we think about when you are feeling high energy, you're kind of anxious, you might be feeling like you are kind of quick to anger. You can kind of feel overwhelmed. You might find that you're kind of like hypervigilant. Like I tend to have like a really strong startle response. And so like somebody comes from behind and I jump up. That's kind of me being in a hyper-aroused state. So, again, we are made with a fight or flight response that has a purpose. But this is when we kind of constantly feel like you're in a fight or flight space. This can be... Again, like you might have a lot of rigidness or obsessive compulsive behaviors, maybe overeating or restrictive eating. In the body level, you're going to have increased blood pressure in this place, rapid breathing, increased heart rate. I had a period of time where I actually went to the doctor and my resting heart rate was like up in the 120s to 130s for a while, just because I was kind of in a place of hyper arousal for a prolonged amount of time. Your oxygen is circulating to your vital organs. So you have a decreased relational ability. You have a decreased ability to digest even your food, and you have a decreased immune response. So you're more prone to illness during this time. So one story of me being in kind of hyper arousal, and Michael actually being in hypo-arousal, which we'll explain in a moment, which is when you're kind of more in shutdown mode, is that we talked about our oldest daughter who has had some health issues, our youngest daughter who had open heart surgery, but our middle daughter, we've noticed, has had some blood sugar issues, and it's made, because of the trauma around medical issues, I tend to get very hyper aroused around medical issues, particularly with my kids. Again, something that I've worked on a lot, and even have done some EMDR for, because there was so much trauma associated with our youngest child. But still, when my kids get hurt, I am very, all of a sudden I feel very intense feelings in my body. And so I had been at SeaWorld all day with my middle daughter, and we were having a great day. And but then when we got into the car on the way home, she just started getting very irritable, and I could tell that she was having kind of a blood sugar dip. We were still trying to figure out, is this does she have diabetes? And we're getting a lot of blood, fasting blood sugar test on her. So I start calling Michael on my phone, kind of profusely, called him once, he doesn't answer, which he likes to keep his phone on silent, which we'll talk about later. So I call him again, he doesn't answer, call him again, he doesn't answer. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, how can we kind of get her some food? To the point that he never answers, and I pull into the driveway. So any thoughts about what my reaction might be at that point? Anybody can kind of picture it? Rage, exactly. So I was very in a hyper-aroused state, and I come in.
I think I was talking on the phone, right?
Yes, that was even worse. It wasn't silent. He was talking on the phone. So I pull into the driveway.
It was a very important conversation.
And I start quickly running in to get some snack, in which Michael responds.
I'm trying to remember what I said, what's wrong? Or
No, he was like, hey, I was on the phone.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I was on the phone. Yeah.
It didn't go well. But the point is, and he's, is that when you are in a hyper-aroused state like that, and someone goes hypo, and this can come up in marriage, is that all of a sudden I felt so alone and even more agitated, where if I think we had some kind of co-regulating experience of gosh, I hear that you're really upset, and what can I do to help? If he can kind of match and also be kind of activated opposed to really low, but it was a miss. So this is where the window of tolerance comes in.
That didn't work out great. So the
Just
Oh yeah, the hyperarousal that Rachel was just talking about, think of that as like 8 to 10 on the scale. And then the hypoarousal, which I'll talk about, is 1 to 3. And so we'll often ask, like, where are you on the scale? You know, like, I feel like I'm at a 7 right now, or I'm, kind of getting close. I'm borderline. So it's just helpful, kind of like language, to almost de-escalate the tension that's happening, right? Like, it's just helpful language. And so hypoarousal often is associated with like a freeze response, like kind of going into this like dissociative, non-present, numb state of being, where you're unavailable, you're disconnected, you're kind of just in autopilot. There's a flat affect, and there's not really a display of emotion. There's a separation, kind of a disintegration from your feelings or emotions. The body literally has, when you're in this state of hypoarousal, when you're kind of in a shutdown state, has a decreased heart rate, a decreased blood pressure, decreased temperature, decreased muscle tone, decreased facial expression, decreased eye contact and social behavior, decreased sexual responses, decreased immune response. So you get the idea, down, like you're kind of down. You're in this passive, withdrawn state of being. And so we have just found this to be incredibly helpful to kind of understand how an argument can go from 0 to 65 in no time, because there's a lot of factors happening that's even beyond what the content of an argument is. And again, it goes back to this, like, getting to become aware of what's happening in your body is going to be super important. And so we have a fun little exercise for you guys to do. We're going to put up different scenarios on the screen, and we'll kind of describe what the scenarios are. And I want you to try to kind of envision yourself in these scenarios and rate where you would be on the window of tolerance. Like, what scale would you be? Would you be in a hypoaroused state? Would you be fairly efficient in your ability to regulate your emotion, or would you be in this anxious, high energy, hyperarousal state? So I'll go first. Being Central Florida, it's like August, right? Hurricane season. And you're watching the news and all the news channels and the internet, and you see that this hurricane is coming straight for Central Florida. Just take a minute, a second, and just rate, where would you be? Where would you be there in your window of tolerance? Grounded? You're in the window of tolerance, yeah. What? Is if you were born in Central Florida, you might be a little less anxious, because you're just oh, we've seen this 1,000 times and it's not going to be that big of a deal. That's right, yeah.
You've planned a lovely dinner for your spouse and they're running late. And perhaps I'll just add, and their phone is on silent.
What'd you say? 10 out of 10?
I said I'm already at a 10.
Oh, already at 10. Oh, yeah. We need to have a support group for silent cell phones. All right. Coming home, whatever scenario you find yourself, and you see this kitchen. Who sees this thing and says there's nothing wrong with it? What's wrong? I don't understand what's going on. Anybody? Do we have any? Drew?
I'm laughing because our table kind of agrees that the hurricane, it's like, yeah, whatever. That is like,
That's right. That's right. Oh.
This is your spouse is scrolling on the phone and you have an emotional need.
What'd you say? You're going up there. Okay. Yeah. All right, this is a picture of you spending time with the Lord. Quiet time with the Lord. It could be with just you, or it could be you and your spouse, and you guys are having a devotional. You're praying together, reading God's Word together. Where would you guys be there? Assuming no one's on their phone.
This is an email you received that your insurance company is not covering your recent medical procedure.
How much? What was the range? Like $4,000 procedure, or like
the range of the medical procedure. Sorry, I thought you said where is rage.
Oh, rage.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought.
Range.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's what I heard.
Thank you. Sorry.
I love it.
And the last one. This is a marriage fight. This is, think about your last fight. And I will say, I would rather you be a couple that has conflict than a couple that doesn't fight. Because a couple who has conflict, there's desire, there's a longing for intimacy, and I love being able to work with couples who have fights than who don't. But when you're in the moment, they're not fun. I don't like them. But where do you go? Do you go to hypoarousal? Do you just want to like shut it up and let's go? You're like, no, we're gonna iron this out right now. It depends on the intensity. Yeah, that's true. Brett, what were you saying? How do you win? Yes. So you're rearing up to go, like you're ready to fight. What are we? I feel like we've kind of changed through the years. I used to avoid.
He used to always be hypo, but he's now you're either window or hyper, I feel like.
I'm ready to win. That's right. So we hope that this will be like just a really helpful like window or like idea of like how to manage the window. And so the good news is that we want to give you a couple of kind of ways to regulate, like to regulate your affect. And to be able to regulate it, you have to know that or you have to be aware of it. You have to be aware that you are a little distressed, or that you're, a lot of times when you're in hypoarousal, you have to like find ways to like get more energy, like become a little bit more awakened. And
we really believe that a good marriage starts with your own work of self-regulation, that learning these skills for yourself has incredible impact on the relationship.
And so the first one, kind of in light of what Rachel just said, is like learning to regulate yourself is going to be really important. And these are some different ways. whether you're in hyper-aroused state or in hypo-aroused state. So the goal is to try to get into that window of tolerance, that ideal window. So deep breathing, like learning to just even notice your breathing, taking a moment. And even just that ability to reflect is like having to turn parts of the brain on that are getting shut off because you're in those states of arousal. So learning a deep breathing exercise. Increasing the awareness of your affect state. Daniel Siegel, who came up with this, calls this phenomenon like name it to tame it. And so what he means by this is if you can name what you're feeling, even if you don't like what you're feeling, it actually can help to calm you. And so when I'm angry, if I can like acknowledge I'm feeling angry, just the idea of naming it helps me not to react out of that anger. It's like this idea of like becoming aware and being able to name and tame what you're feeling and notice and observe what you're feeling rather than react out of it. And when I'm not in the window of tolerance and I'm not able to name and tame it, then I'm going to act out. And then that usually doesn't go well. I love what Paul says here. We could apply what Paul says here. Take every thought captive, like this idea of like, know what's happening inside of you so that you can live a life that's loving and not, going to create sinful responses. And so this, and then I'm going to show you another exercise. Actually, do we have time? I think I might skip that exercise just for time's sake. But it's a grounding exercise in the here and now. And the reason why I like to do it, I think typically, particularly for the church, is because oftentimes we don't have these ideas of connecting with the body. And so a grounding exercise is really simple, but it's like learning to like notice what all the different parts of your body is feeling, and just like notice your hands, notice your arms, notice your feet, notice what's happening, and just this awareness, increasing awareness to your somatic experience. Now, for a hypo-aroused person, deep, calm breathing actually is not what a hypo-aroused person needs. They actually need like quick breaths to kind of get their bodies more activated. If they're kind of in this shutdown mode, and so I can often, even like if I'm feeling that, even just like moving my body into a different position when I'm talking to Rachel, like if we're trying to work through a conflict and I'm like laying in bed, like I could fall asleep and that's not going to go well. And so like, like to learn like just to, stand up or sit up in my bed, and like just that posture change helps me to kind of come back from a hypo-arousal state to more of a, ideal state. The second one that we have found to be incredibly helpful is the Lord wants to like be our soother. That's not all he wants to be, but that's one thing that he wants to be. In 1 Peter it says, cast all your anxieties on me because I care for you. So in the places of misattunement, that will happen in marriage, that will happen in all of your earthly relationships, there is one who is like perfectly attuned to us. And so the second piece is like, how are you regulating with God? And this is like this is a big question, because a lot of times if you came from like a family that had a more rageful experience, we often can project our earthly experiences with our father or with our primary caregiver onto God. And in some ways, God's big enough for that, but he wants you to like work through that with him. Like he wants to be a safe space for you. And I love that the context of 1 Peter is literally, it's Paul writing to, written in Rome most likely, and it's two churches who are being persecuted, like under the Roman Empire. And so it's like, this isn't just like, cast your anxieties because I care for you. It's like, these people are probably in like hyper-aroused states, and like, come to me, all you who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. I think
Okay, I'll go get it.
did I leave it in the car there, or did I bring it in? Okay, sorry, I thought I left it in the car. We have this picture that hangs in our office at home. Yeah, sorry guys. It's of, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's of Jesus, and it's Jesus and the Lamb is the name of the picture, and it's like this tender picture of Jesus embracing a lamb, and it's just it creates that sense of I'm seen, I'm attuned, I'm loved, I can rest, and it's out of that state that we operate so much better from that state.
And finally, I wanted to talk some about regulating in others. And we know that we are made to regulate with someone else. When a baby comes out and that first experience of the baby getting on the mom's chest of, okay, their temperature is coming together, the heartbeats are coming together. So we know that we are meant to regulate within context of relationship with God and with ourselves. And so one of the things that I wanted to mention is that when couples are in conflict, that they've done brain scans, and more so than resolving the conflict, because oftentimes 80% of conflict is unresolvable, that it's being understood, heard, and listened to that is what actually soothes the system. And then you end up feeling the intimacy that a lot of times the conflict kind of spurs out of. And so we have developed this pattern sometimes of really trying to kind of hear one another and understand one another. We're gonna try to do a demo in a minute of that. But aside from that too, is that I have found at a bodily level that me putting my head on Michael's chest and actually listening to his heartbeat is very soothing for me. And so oftentimes, when I'm dysregulated or in hyperarousal, if I can get to a point where I can kind of have some type of touch. Sometimes a weighted blanket is really good for my body, but sometimes just where if I'm Michael, can I just get my ear to your chest and kind of find some kind of rhythm to his heartbeat? That's very, very helpful. So,
yeah, I was just going to add too, I know that we're talking here about marriage and the importance of regulating with our spouse. But I think a rich marriage also will include good friendships, where you're sharing kind of what's happening in your life and being willing to be vulnerable to do that. The gift, I think that, there's such wisdom in, the body of Christ being a community, that can hold each other's burdens and feel a sense of togetherness versus an aloneness. And so that skill, certainly it might look different and at different levels than it does with your spouse, but having that with friends, brothers and sisters that know you, I think is huge. So,
and I'm so glad Michael mentioned that, because we have a list of probably 2 people each that we both feel like these are people that we both trust, that are kind of for us as a couple, that sometimes I actually regulate more within a friendship, and then kind of I'm able to come back to Michael and in a very different space.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so we're going to do an exercise, and we call this. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, but we call it the 3-minute exercise, and it's a really it feels like it's been super helpful, and I'm going to come over here, and you're going to come over here. And so what we're going to do basically is what Rachel was saying, is that we have a fight, and we literally this morning we're trying to figure out, okay, which one do we want to bring? And so we've decided on a fight that happened on last Saturday. I'll give you.
No, we haven't processed.
Yes, we haven't process, but
Or repaired, should we use the attachment language? We haven't had a repair from it.
right, and which is like healing for us, because so this is not like a major like fight, but it's a typical fight that we can have. But what's healing for us is our ability to still connect over the course of the week, even though that this hasn't been like fully repaired. And so let me give you this scene, and then I'm going to set up like kind of what we're going to be doing, like what the actual like exercise entails. So it was Saturday. So last Saturday, our middle child had a track meet at school. And so it was kind of like a crazy week because we had just gotten back from Boston. And so like it was like the first day after the school week and our work week. And so Saturday was going to be another kind of crazy day with a couple of things. So like we had to get up and take Nora to the track meet. And then we had planned, and then we had to take Hannah to volleyball practice. And then we had planned to meet from 1 to 3.
We were working on this talk, actually.
To finalize, like, okay, let's make sure that so like from 1 to 3 that we were going to make sure that we had like all the slides connected to our notes and all that. And then I was going to go hang out with a buddy, a couple of buddies of mine, for like an hour or so. And then we were going to
Talk about being overscheduled.
Yeah, which is a problem in of itself. And then that night we were going to have a birthday dinner at Agave Azul for me, right?
Yes.
Okay,
His birthday had been the week before while we were in Boston.
Yeah. So with the girls were going to come with us to that. So what we're going to do is first, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
You can go first.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, and then we'll do it, is I'm going to have 3 minutes, or we might not do the full 3 minutes, where I'm just going to share from my point of view, like what was happening inside of me. Now, the most important person in this part is not the person who's talking. It's the person who's listening, okay? So Rachel is going to be the listener. Now, her job is to not have to agree with my context of the fight. She does not have to agree with it. Her only job, and this is super important and been super helpful for me, her only job is to listen and understand what was going on inside of me, okay? So it's not to have to agree with my decision or what I did, but it's to listen and to understand. And then after I'm done, she's going to be like, I hear you saying. So she's going to repeat back to me what she heard me saying. And then she'll ask, this is a very important piece, is there anything else? Did I get it all? And so then I have to kind of just like check in, which you'll see, like, is there more that I need to say? Because some things might not come to me until later.
Sometimes our 3 minutes becomes a 12 minutes, but it's so good because you get to kind of keep talking until you feel really heard.
Yes. So, and then we'll switch it where she gets to have her 3 minutes, and then I'll do the same for her. So, okay. Yeah, I have my mic. I have to kind of get into the situation okay. Okay, so, and you'll kind of hear how the fight happened. So I was already feeling a little bit stressed with all that we had to do on Saturday and Sunday, and still kind of recovering from my race, and I feel like at times we can overcommit, and would prefer to have a little bit more like downtime versus like constantly going. And so I was just feeling like an increased sense of that on Saturday. And I do realize that I probably shouldn't have gone to hang out with my friends, but I was excited about telling them about Boston, and they were like, we hadn't had a chance to connect about that. And so I thought that when I left, I said that I'll come back to the house and by 5:30, and then we'll go to Agave Azul with the kids. And so I thought that we had already communicated that kind of was the plan. And so when I was hanging out with my friends at Peter's house, I was just kind of lost in conversation and enjoying it, and I didn't have my phone on. But then when I did check the phone and I saw that you had called, I was like, hey, like, is everything okay? And when you said that you guys were just going to go to Agave Azul, no, I said, like, is it okay if I stay like 10 or 15 minutes later, right? Is what I said, yeah. I was like, just give me like 10 or 15 more minutes, but I can, but I'll be there. And I think like when you said, well, we're just going to go to Agave Azul and start eating the chips and salsa, and we'll wait for you. Like it really kind of bothered me. I got like upset with you, and I realized, I think what I was feeling was like hurt because it was going to be my birthday dinner, and I really wanted to go together. Like I wanted all of us just to kind of ride together rather than. So like when you said that you were just going to go and meet me there, I just felt like you weren't like, like you kind of missed that it was supposed to be like a birthday dinner for me. And so I think underneath the text, when I said, but it's my birthday, I realized that there was like a dig there to you, but I think underneath that I was like just hurt and excited. Like I was excited about telling the story about Boston.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing your hurt with me, and I feel like that impacts me. So it sounds like the day was playing out. It was stressful. There was a really overscheduled day, and but you felt an excitement to go spend time with your friends to tell them more about Boston, because this is kind of your running buddies, so that makes sense. And then you thought the plan was pretty clear of you wanted to come home because it was important to you that we all drove together to your birthday dinner, and you were just really enjoying the time. And then when you got my calls and responded to me, and I said that we would just meet you at Agave Azul and we would start eating the chips and salsa, I actually feel really like, oh, that must have really hurt you, and I can see that. And then, and then you sent the text, and you understand that it was a bit of a dig, but the underlying message was that you felt a sense of hurt, that I would kind of just say, hey, meeting you at the restaurant, instead of like, hey, come home, take your time, like, we'll go together. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else?
Think through that. Well, I felt your distance when we were at the table for the first 20 minutes or so. And then I was like, man, this doesn't feel fun, because it felt like you were,
I hear you say that, that you kind of felt like me being kind of edgy and distant to kind of maybe even punish you the first kind of 20 minutes of the birthday.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else?
No, I think that's good. Okay. Thank you. I literally feel like, I feel hurt. Yeah, to the degree that I can in this setting, but I do. I do feel a sense of thank you for hearing me.
Well, and I feel like just the power of like getting you to share that you were hurt like makes it so much more impactful to me. So thank you. Okay, let me see how I can transition to where I was at. So I think I felt like it was a day that we were kind of putting off the kids a bit because we were working on the talk. And so I feel like there's only so much like screen time or, kind of entertain yourself you can do before they're kind of ready for an outing. And then I know that we try to like put off the snacks, especially since we're spending money on dinner. And so the kids kind of started like, we're hungry. Where's Daddy? I thought we were celebrating his birthday tonight. And so I was like, gosh, Michael is halfway between Agave Azul and like where you were hanging out at Peter's house. I was like, well, maybe we could just meet there. And so I started calling you. And when I was calling you, I noticed that you weren't picking up your phone, which seems to be like it has
some history.
It has some history. And it made me start to feel anxious and unimportant. Like this doesn't set the stage for like a beautiful birthday family dinner because you're kind of with your friends and you're not answering your phone. And so I tended to, even though it's probably not your intention, I tended to feel not thought of. Like kind of, I'm like wrangling these hungry kids who are excited to celebrate your birthday, and you're not answering the phone. And so I did feel bad when I said, why don't we go eat some chips and salsa, because I think, and wait for you there, because I knew that you wanted to drive together, but I think I also was just like really like, it was a bit self-protective and like, I got to get these kids somewhere out of our house because they're like ready to go. And then, and so when we got there, I did find that I was in my heart kind of wanting to punish you a bit. But then I was like, why am I doing this? Because it's your birthday. And that's just felt really kind of selfish on my part. And so that's when I kind of got to the point where I was like, just kind of transition. I wanted to enjoy the time together.
Okay. So I hear you saying that already that day you were kind of feeling like we were putting off the kids and trying to get things done, and trying to get them to kind of do their thing. And so you were already, and when I left, so because I left and you were by yourself with them, kind of in the peak of that, like that you were feeling just, we're not going to be able to hang out like this. Like they're hungry, they're antsy, they're kind of ready to go. And so you wanted to make sure that they were, able to, like, regulated in some sense. And then, so when you called me and I wasn't answering, that created a sense of feeling unimportant or just kind of dismissed, which I know has been a theme when I don't answer the phone. And so I also heard you say that there's a part of you that wanted to punish me when we first got there, and that even there was a dig with like, we'll just go and eat chips and salsa until you get there. Is there anything else?
I think that the text, "It's my birthday," did feel like kind of passive aggressive, like because your voice sounded normal on the phone, but then like I was like, oh, he's really angry, but he's not really owning his anger.
And how did that make you feel?
I mean, just not as close to you. Like it didn't, like we didn't have a good pathway to a repair. Because I knew that you were upset, but you didn't really say that you were upset. And then, like, we didn't talk about the fact that I was kind of panicked. And so, I think the text was tough.
Okay, so I hear you saying that my text was passive-aggressive, and a part of the reason why you felt distant from me in the beginning, because like I wasn't actually owning that I felt hurt or that I was upset with you.
Yeah.
Is there anything else, or?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, so real quick, I'll say this because I feel moved to do this, that a 3 minutes doesn't always involve like asking for forgiveness, but in this particular moment, the fact that we've heard each other now wants me to ask for forgiveness. So I just want to say, will you forgive me for just the way that I kind of decided to go to the restaurant and then kind of tried to punish you. I would have liked to have done it differently.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think that kind of along the same spirit of like taking responsibility, you actually didn't mention this, but I do know that I said 5:30 and then I kind of pushed it. I was like, oh, I'm like, give me 10 or 15 more minutes. And I think I was like kind of lost in my own experience that I wasn't really thinking about like what all you were holding back at home. And then I do think, yeah, there were like, that was just not cool, the dig of like, it's my birthday, like almost to guilt you. Yeah, so I apologize. I'm sorry for that.
Thank you.
Cool. Can I give you a hug? Thank you. Thank you, guys. Yeah. It's like you kind of can get into it a little bit. But.
Well, and we didn't realize, obviously, what was underneath of all of that. I mean, that goes to show, like, you don't even realize, like, how something that happened a week ago, like, how much we still held about it that was accessible when we revisited it.
And I actually forgot about the putting the kids off, like, part of the day. Like, when you said that, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I did feel that. And then I was like, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to go hang out with my friends. And then, like, you were there. So, yeah, that was helpful. Any feedback or comments or thoughts?
The whole time I was sitting here listening to this, I can totally relate to this. I know my husband's not here, but with our kids were on schedule. Man, they had to eat by this time, and we didn't want any cranky kids at the table to ruin any sort of whatever we might have been. So I was totally relating with you. Hey, you can go have his fun. You realizing that you're still going to be there with the kids, and he can come and have fun. But I'm like totally with you with the kids because I'm always thinking about other people, thinking about everybody. Let's make them happy. Let's keep them.
Yep.
So that was tough to watch. But.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for offering that. And yeah, I do feel like there's something in our bodies, like whether it's anxious attachment or just being women, that it's like holding the whole.
Yeah, the whole thing together.
Yeah.
And I thought it was great you let him go ahead, and you ran the Boston Marathon, kudos to you. That was hard to get into. So I would be saying, celebrate with your friends, have more time.
But I'm going to get the chips and salsa.
Dang, they have good chips and salsa and guac and agave azul too.
Any other gay?
So one thing I loved about the way you did it, and you didn't set it up this way, is that it's really important to only speak from your perspective and not project motives on the other person. And you did such a brilliant job of just not editing your emotions, including them all, leaving that when you're not criticizing the other person, they actually can hear you better and receive it better. So I really love that you only spoke from her perspective without that criticism.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah. Yes.
One of the things that I noticed that was really helpful to me, and I timed it, I hope you don't mind.
Oh no, yeah.
You guys 13 minutes to resolve that. And what was helpful for me was when I have discussions, sometimes I get caught up in my perspective, and I want to keep going over and over and over.
Yeah.
I could take the whole 13 minutes myself.
Yeah.
But I thought what was nice was the respect that you showed each other to listen, and then to repeat back what you heard. That was really helpful.
Yeah, thank you for offering that. Emily?
I think something that's so valuable about seeing you guys work through that too is that it didn't seem like a huge conflict, like you said, but it shows how important even working through those little things are, because if we do continue to like let those things go and it's like it kind of blew over, it kind of got better, it's like a missed opportunity to connect.
And you can hear, I don't know if you could hear, there are some themes of historical conflict, right? That speak to like a bigger dynamic of like places of distrust and hurt that we've experienced, both for us and our relationship, but
even in historically, like at one level it's a phone on silent, at another level it's abandonment, and then that takes me back to my childhood story too. So yeah, thanks
for speaking to that. Did I miss someone over here? Yes.
Well, I was thinking, from your wife's perspective, you just went with him to Boston and you did all these things for him, and now you're trying to have a birthday dinner for him.
That's true.
And you're taking care of the girls. I don't know, I feel like that side at least, because you're trying to do something nice for him, you're even letting him go see his buddy.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the decency to he doesn't answer his phone.
Right.
He's longer, so, but you were very great.
Well, and I so feel validated by that, and I have to say
and
that
I can hear you a little bit better sometimes than when Rachel said.
well, and I really appreciate what you said, because the reality is when he said it's my birthday, it cut like. Well, and like that's part of how I find my identity is like celebrating and loving him well. So I think he at an unconscious level knew that was the text to send that would get me, because I was like, oh my gosh, he's like portraying me as this wife that doesn't even like celebrate her husband. That's not really me, you know?
That's true. That's true.
Becky?
Hold on, I want to get a man up here.
Okay.
Mark. Yeah.
Like I said, you can spark it. Late 15. So that part is just like, I would feel the same way.
Yeah.
This isn't about sides now, people.
Every day you can have a little bit of conflict, and the verses like bear with one another.
Yes.
How do you guys choose how often to do that exercise? Because you could do it every day.
Right.
I need to be heard, and you're like, really?
Yes. You want to speak to that?
I guess you guys have had to decide together what's worth that for 10-minute exercise a month.
Which would require like some self-regulation. I think of like, I don't think this is worth the battle, I think that happens over time. I don't know. What would you say?
I think it depends on the week too. Like we've had the 3 minutes sometimes like 4 times in a week, and sometimes we haven't done it for like a couple months at a time too. So, and we probably wouldn't have done that conflict if it wasn't for this. So that's actually really sweet. But I do think like the whole death by 1,000 paper cuts is so true in marriage. Like do it often enough that, because not only do I feel repaired supernaturally, not only do I feel repaired from that thing that happened last week, I feel a deeper repair. Like, there's a deeper sense of being seen and heard that kind of translates to other areas as well. So. And
to Emily's point of like, it's a small fight, but like, if you keep having those small fights, the barriers become further. And so, yeah.
Not listen to be defensive and say, well, you said this, well, I need to say this, and like interrupting each other, like waiting the 3 minutes and then repeating what you said before you even got your turn. I felt like that was really
Yes, thank you. I don't think we as a culture know how to listen, actually. Like we're just so quick to like getting ready. And so that was actually super freeing for me to be like, my role, my job is not to have to defend, but just to listen. Like that like freed me up like in the exercise.
So how did you guys develop those tools? Because there's things you need to keep you structured, right? So obviously I hear you say.
Yes.
Because you can, when the other person speaks, there's so many different directions you can go with that, and that helps keep you on task in what they're doing and staying structured mean, obviously, it's not something that's going to happen right away, and you may have to even practice that, but you have to have some kind of structure around that, and it seems like you guys have developed that.
Yes, even that code word of like, I hear you saying, or I notice. So it's not like, it's almost tentative in nature, like you're saying something, but you're actually asking, is this right? Or a big kind of way to think of it is kind of what Gay was saying, is like speaking from I statements, like rather than getting involved with like, you did this or you did that, but coming from that sense of I. And so those are some cue words that can help, that have helped us like stay along the track so it doesn't derail into.
Well, and 3 minutes is actually very intentional time amount, because if he had gone much beyond 3 minutes, I wouldn't have been able to like really truly go back to the beginning of what he said, and so that's why, sometimes it's like, I feel like that, like I need 15 minutes, but after 3 minutes, Michael really can't, he's not going to be able to like repeat it back to me, so. Go ahead.
So I know you mentioned like death by 1,000 paper cuts, and one thing that I know that I've struggled with, and I like the tools, I'm curious about utilizing it, but one thing that I have struggled with is emotional fatigue. So how do I, if we're going to have little conflicts, how do I continue to allow myself to reset, to give each little thing its due, versus picking and choosing which ones I deem as important that may not be the ones that she feels that carry the most weight. Does that make sense?
So like explain a little bit more when you say your emotional fatigue, to like address the situations?
Yeah, so for example, for me personally, being in healthcare and being a provider, and sometimes at the end of the day, I'm burned out from taking care of other people. I'm kind of emotionally shot from having to think through a bunch of things and maybe mentally exhausted.
Yeah.
And then that kind of will carry over. And so if there's something that she feels is important or is that I may have done that maybe that we need to discuss, sometimes I will get to the point to where, is it really that important? And then I kind of disregard it, push it to the wayside, and then pick.
But the reason you disregard it is because you're exhausted.
Yeah, and so, or I go, okay, is this really worth talking?
Okay,
I'm self-aware to know that that's something that I haven't had an issue with.
Yeah.
And try to take the time to acknowledge that while I don't feel it's important to you, I may not see it that way. And I don't know. It's
because you're navigating your own like need there of like I need some space, but you also are aware of somehow.
I don't want to ignore what's important.
Yeah, and so what I would say, unless you can add to this, but what comes to my mind is one is getting just to acknowledge like, hey babe, like I hear that this is important to you. I don't think I have more than 20 minutes of emotional capacity tonight. We could talk about it then, or could we do it another time? Now, if you are the one that says, do it another time, when you're a little bit more available, I think it really is like important that you're the one that initiates that follow-up versus like, can we talk about it tomorrow? And it still kind of weighs on her to have to bring it up, because that's going to build trust in the relationship. Because I think that's okay. I mean, there have been times that both of us at different times are like, I'm exhausted. Like it's been a long day. I do hear this is important. Like, could we make some space to do it? Now, if it's really urgent and like it's like, no, I can't, then in some ways you'll have to like really ask Holy Spirit, right, to like give me the energy. But I don't think it's wrong to say I need a break or I'm just so emotionally exhausted. But I do think you have to come back. You have to be the one that comes back to it.
I think.
Go ahead, Gay.
I actually have a rubric.
It's a great question. When do we have to talk about things and when can we let it slide? And so I actually have a way that you can evaluate that. So I wanted to make sure that you had something in your hands. And one is, of course, it's a glory to be able to overlook a slight or a hard feeling. But if you notice that hard feeling doesn't go away and that you really can't overlook it, or worse, you notice that you're very distant from your spouse, and there's a distance between you that needs to be repaired and come close. So I'd say, like, there's a rupture there, which means distance. Finding a way to close that distance often has to do with having this kind of repair. So 2 things. Can I overlook it? If I can't, I need to address it. Second thing is, do I feel a distance? And one last thing, and this is for couples that have had 1,000 paper cuts, is there a wall where I don't even want to come close, right? So that's another great cue to talk about it.
Yeah, thank you, Gay. Let's do lunch, and then we can keep the question and answers while we're eating.
Yeah, thank you. Can we give a round of applause for these two? Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.